So what constitutes a classic anime? This is a video I was originally going to script out, like a bunch of other stuff I've done on the stream recently that I've decided to make more interactive. But this was a video I was going to script out, as I just said, and it was going to basically boil down to a sort of an attack almost on Attack on Titan. Because I don't think Attack on Titan could be considered a classic anime or a classic manga, because of what I believe a classic manga or anime has to entail. Something I've struggled with is whether or not I would consider Berserk to be a classic, but I don't see classic as necessarily a point of praise. I don't think classic is necessarily like the highest praise you could give a work. I think it's just a category, a subcategory that usually means it's pretty great. So to briefly go over this, here they got a bunch of classics. I just googled classic anime. So it's got a bunch of movies mostly. Anime movies seem to have like a much better reputation among like mainstream people and amongst the mainstream audiences that consider what to be a classic, right? Movies seem to get over way better with a mainstream audience than normal anime TV shows do. We've got End of Ava here. Now, Evangelion is an anime I would consider to be a classic, and so would Cowboy Bebop. These are the only two that I've seen that I would consider to be a classic. And it sort of always boils down to how eclectic a series is. Evangelion, and it's almost has to do with theming, right? Attack on Titan has a very supernatural premise. It's not... Eventually it gets into some thematics, and there's always themes there from the beginning, but they're not directly applicable in a very easy to understand manner, like I think Bebop and Evangelion are, and that's why they would be more classical anime. Also, these two, Evangelion and Bebop, have stood up to the test of time. They both still look great, and modern contemporary anime audiences could watch both of them and appreciate both of them if they're over the age of 18. Maturity also has a lot to do with why I would consider these to be classics. Evangelion sort of does appeal to a younger audience somewhat, since their main character is 14, when the Bebop crew, most of these guys, I guess Spike's probably in his 20s. Do we have definitive ages on this? Ages of the Bebop crew. I know Ed's younger and he sort of appeals to kids more. I'm still on images. But Jet is 36, Spike is 24, Faye is 24, and Ed is 14. Okay, see, these are very atypical anime ages. I guess atypical might be the exact opposite of what I'm trying to say. But they are not traditional. Traditional anime protagonists like Eren are 15 years old, and maybe they grow up as we grow up, because it's been 10 years since Eren was... I guess Eren was probably 12 or something at the very beginning, or maybe he was 11. It doesn't matter. Eren's much younger, and is Eren 10 years older than he was at the beginning? So it's been 10 years of Attack on Titan. But the point is, Eren's very much a shonen protagonist at the very beginning, a generic one at that, and it's clear that they're trying to appeal to that. Now, Shinji is almost the atypical anime protagonist. Now I'm using the word correctly, because he has short black hair. He's very generic looking. Any Asian boy could very much what do you call it? What is it called? Why is this escaping me right now? Could portray themselves. What do you call it? Portray themselves onto him. Project themselves onto him is what I'm looking for. He's very easy to relate to, aesthetically wise. Mentally, that's what the author's going for. That's what Hideaki Anno's going for. They're trying to make Shinji as relatable as possible to the sort of darker side of the audience. I've made jokes in my own videos about every anime protagonist looking like Shinji. Eren certainly does have a lot of similarities to him. Even Guts is a much beefier version of Shinji. He's got short black hair. He's Asian skin looking, possibly white. Very easy to project yourself onto. But Shinji and Evangelion is not appealing explicitly to teenagers. Evangelion's more about communication, right? And how communicating with people is difficult, and how you don't always say what you mean, and you don't communicate your emotions with people very well. This image of Shinji almost portrays it perfectly. He's very isolated. He tries to get closer to people, but he doesn't really know how. And sort of the entire show of Evangelion is about a very central element of the human condition. It's something everyone can relate to. It's something everyone must do. You must communicate with other people to survive at some point in your life. Most likely for most of it. Even if you're a recluse, you're probably born into a family or something like that, and you had to communicate with them. Human communication is basically what Evangelion's about, and sort of the failure and what people will try to do. The main bad guy, Seele, or whatever their eventual names are in the end of Evangelion, like, they're basically a bunch of old men who have given up on being able to communicate and get along with other people, so they decide to make everyone into one entity. It's very complicated. If you've seen it, you know what the fuck I'm talking about. They've sort of given up so much that they'll just say, fuck it, if we all become one being, we can understand each other because we'll all be one entity. And Shinji sort of rejects that. Well, not sort of, he absolutely rejects that. Him and Asuka seem to be the only ones that reject this and want to try and keep their independence and communicate with each other here she is in the background, our girl Asuka, when they have been so brutal and mean and have hurt each other so much in the course of the series. The two of them, these young kids, decide to be braver than the rest of humanity in Evangelion and decide to give it another shot. It's sort of, communication is worth it and you have to fight through it. That's sort of the core message of Vinland Saga. When the core message of Attack on Titan is more shifty, right? It's very different. There's commentaries on nationalism, on racism, on all these sort of historical events. But Attack on Titan is more a mystery show. The meta text is not the main point of Attack on Titan. The normal text, the basic text, is very interesting. That's what most people are around for. If Attack on Titan does have an Evangelion ending, as much as I would like it, I don't think not anyone, but most people aren't going to be satisfied with it like that, when the meta text becomes very blatant and the themes sort of overtake the story. If the next chapter, the world floods with a Red Sea, people are going to be like, but what happened to all these mysteries and these untied events that in Evangelion you're like, fuck it, we don't care, we got the core conceit of the message. We don't need to know every little idiosyncratic bit of the lore. Whereas in Attack on Titan, there's definitely a clamoring within the community to learn that, and it's very much a necessary factor for the audience to feel fulfilled. We must get those answers. We must know what Eren was thinking the whole time. We must know how they're going to defeat Eren and how everything factors in and how all these characters relate. Attack on Titan's also a lot longer than Evangelion, obviously, so there's more build-up. So this theme idea is what I'm trying to get at here, is where classic anime have to have a very, real, very direct theme, I think. That's one of the big... what do you call it? Not ingredients. I guess ingredients works, but prerequisites to be considered a classic anime. Now, Bebop in this regard is much more eclectic, whereas Evangelion sticks to the universal theme of communication. Bebop and Rocksteady's coming up. Okay, that's clever. Cowboy Bebop, in every one of its episodes, has a different universal theme of the human existence, of the human conscience. It commentates on nearly everything. It's very eclectic in its 26 episodes. There's that one episode that basically boils down to don't leave shit in your fridge. It's like a life lesson that everyone will learn. And I haven't lived on my own yet, and I know eventually I will make that mistake because humans have to make the mistakes to learn from them. But Bebop is just sort of a cynical, the best life advice anyone could probably ever give you is don't leave shit in your fridge for too long, because it will become old and musty and will become an alien fucking genotype and try and kill all you and your friends when you're on your spaceship. That's sort of the best way I can sort of put it into words, right? It's a very simple message, but it's a message, and every episode like that has a message. Bebop is so dense with thematic relevance. I remember excuse me, in the Jet episode, in the first Jet episode with his ex-fiancée or girlfriend, I don't remember if they were engaged. Um, Great episode, right? But there's like a weird, like 1 minute scene with Faye and Ed where Faye's in the bikini. It's like one of the most famous shots from Bebop because it's probably the most scantily clad she is in the entire show. She's in like the very, very micro bikini, and Faye and fucking Ed comes up and is trying to figure out like what the fuck she's doing because she's tanning, right? What Ganymede is where they are, right? And it's like really sunny, so it's a good opportunity for Faye to tan. And this scene plays out as sort of a commentary on looks and how people will try to make themselves look better, even though it's completely futile. And Ed ends up ending the scene saying like, "Oh, futile, entirely futile," or something. And she like does a spin. It's sort of like that 1 minute scene was such a good characterization scene, and shows how different these two characters are. Because I think that's the second episode Ed is in, but it's almost also this commentary on beauty aesthetics. That's like such a universal thing in the real world that the show just took a minute out of its episode to comment on. And this happens everything. It's so dense with these little social commentaries and thematic leanings and trappings. It's so dense with all of this stuff that it has to be considered a classic because it comments on something everyone will relate to and a lot of things that everyone will relate to. Whereas it's not. Evangelion has one theme. It's a very basic, fundamental theme to every person's life, whereas Bebop is more eclectic and sort of tries to comment on each individual little aspect of life. There's the scene in episode 6 where Spike shoots the little kid who's actually like 300 years old or whatever with the charm or whatever, and it turns him and it ages him, and it's a really beautiful, scary scene where he ages and it's well animated and all that shit. And like he's like been a very one-note villain up until that point, just murdering people, and he doesn't care because he's fucking lived such a pained, long existence that at this point it's bewildering for him to even care about like one person's life when he's immortal. He can never die. Even if they put him in jail for 100 years, eventually everyone that'll put him in jail will have died and he can get out, no matter the sentence. So there's like no reason for him to give a fuck about like murdering people, since he doesn't have much of a moral code. But Spike shoots him at the end, and it like ages him, and he has a very humanizing little final scene where he's like it's like a commentary on what people think before they die, and he looks at Spike and he goes like, "Do you understand? Do you understand?" after he gives this speech. And it's one of my favorite moments in the entire show because it's like I feel weightless, like I don't have to carry that weight anymore, which is iconically the final line in Cowboy Bebop. You're gonna carry that weight. We can play the fucking Digibro video if you need any more commentary on that. We're probably not, gonna carry that weight. Fuck, I didn't click down before I clicked fucking enter. I don't know. Is it playing through our headphones? And this sort of, I don't think Digibro says this line in this video. Maybe he does. He probably does. But it's like sort of an antithesis of everything Cowboy Bebop means. It's like very sad. There's all these messages, but you can't think about them. You gotta keep going. Man, this video is so fucking good. Nearly at 1 million views, and it fucking deserves it. And hold on, we're not gonna play the whole thing. Oh, Digibro voice. It's such a melancholic video. It's really fucking sad video. It really gets to you. It's a great video. You can go watch it on your own. But it's just so eclectic in that issue, and it comments on everything. Like, those are just two examples. I've had it in the back of my mind to make a series called Overanalyzing Bebop, where I sort of break down all the little tiny commentaries it does. In the first episode, the girl, right, the one that's supposedly pregnant, but she's actually hiding all the drugs there. She has a line that I've always really liked. It's like she says to Spike, he's like, all foreigners are rich, and it's sort of something like you've probably heard that before in your life at some point, and it's like, yeah, people are very ignorant about how other people live. and it's sort of just a commentary on like you don't know what you have until it's gone. Everyone like fantasizes about a certain point, and the very few people that actually become rich don't think it's that great, and like more money just means more problems is like a big Denzel Curry line that I always think about, where it's like, yeah, everyone that doesn't have money wants money, and then when you get money, you just realize it just brings along a whole list of more problems. And it's like there is no, this paradise of happiness doesn't exist. Like that girl wanted to go to Mars, and she thought if she ever got to Mars, her life would be great. She will have made it. Everything will be fulfilled, but that's just not true. Spike was born on Mars. He's not fulfilled at all. There's plenty of depressed people on Mars, I'm pretty sure. And it's sort of like a very cynical version in that show, because eventually she just decides to kill herself. She kills her husband, who's fucked up on that red eye shit, and she just fucking drives into the cops who are shooting at them for some reason. And she ends up dead, and there's that great scene of her getting shot, and it looks like blood, but it's actually the capsules coming out of her, and it's like the perfect symbolism. Fucking Cowboy Bebop is so great, visually, thematically. That's why it's a classic. But those are the only two I can think about. My other favorite shows, like my favorite show ever is Black Lagoon, but I would never consider that a classic. I think it's better than both of these shows. I think the dub's outstanding, but I really like Black Lagoon for the dialogue, right? That's my favorite part. That and Rock and Revy's characters. I really love Etta as a character. Basically, the dialogue and the characters are so great in that show that it carries it to become my favorite show ever, right? But I would never consider it to be a classic. Like, it's not thematically dense as either one of these shows, where Bebop has so many little thematic elements that like cultivate into little random different things. Whereas Evangelion is like basically a theme incarnate. It's one show, one theme, and that's what you'll understand by the end of it. Black Lagoon is more just a story about Rock and Revy, right? Them as characters, how they grow, how people interact, and it's portrayed through these two diametrically opposed yet so similar and probably loving individuals, right? That's sort of it's like a character like commentary. I don't know if I'd call it a character study. I don't know, is Berserk technically a character study? Like, I don't know. Berserk has these like grand themes and stuff, but it tries to tie the subtext into the actual text too much for me to consider it a classic. Like, I like Berserk probably more than Evangelion and Cowboy Bebop as well, but I don't think I'd consider it a classic, which I think a lot of people would put it in this category. Like, it is definitely a legacy. It has a lot of things, but Bebop and Evangelion, they're done, right? Berserk's still ongoing, so it's not necessarily like... It does have the age factor because it's older than both of these shows that I'm considering a classic, but it's not done, right? And it's sort of evolved as it's gone on. It definitely looks different now than when it did back then. It still has... It doesn't really have a classic 90s aesthetic anymore. It's more flowy and new and like beautiful. Berserk new best pages. Let's see this. This shit'll look fucking great. When I click it on Pinterest, that's a trap. Like, right, this is volume 34, so this is pretty recent. This doesn't necessarily look that looks 90s because these three characters were conceived in the 90s. But a page like this is probably one of the most beautiful Berserk pages. But it doesn't look 90s, right? Even though all these concepts, it's very flowy. It's got the little shirike thing here that is not 90s at all. Like, it doesn't have that classic aesthetic the whole way through. It sort of changes and adapts as time goes on. As we know, Miura eventually quit using physical drawings and is now digitally making Berserk. Vinland Saga is not a classic yet either. It's very recent. It comes from the Berserk camp. So I wouldn't consider it a classic at all. Devilman now is definitely a classic manga because it is very... it's very influential as well. I guess that's another thing we could put into the classic mantra. But everyone knows Devilman. It inspired so much. It has one theme, and it drives that theme fucking home, and it drives it home harder than anything else. The sort of nihilistic aspect of Devilman. If we'll go Devilman ending. I made a whole Attack on Titan video about the Devilman ending. The whole last stream was about it, so Uh, no spoiler alert, right? It drives it home. I don't think Crybaby is necessarily a classic. It's sort of a take on a classic manga because it's like a classic brought into the modern aesthetic, even though it's not really because I forget the director's name, but his aesthetic is so uh, unique that it's not really modern anime aesthetic. It's, oh, look at this. That's cool as fuck. It's like a high res colored version of the. Canonically, originally, was the sea red? It probably was, right? I don't know. I don't think the anime, like the original anime adaptation, wasn't like the manga, right? What is this? Fucking looks like Casca. Isn't it weird? This is going to be a side point, but isn't it weird when something that's considered a classic, like the next generation takes it and makes something better, and then the original classic gets remade, but they take from the thing that originally took from the classic? There's two examples I can think of this: Devilman and Uncharted and Tomb Raider. Devilman and Berserk, Uncharted and Tomb Raider. Like, Uncharted was clearly based on sort of Tomb Raider that was loosely based on Indiana Jones rather. Um, and it's funny because Uncharted's so good and so much better than Tomb Raider, but now the new Tomb Raiders steal things from Uncharted. It's sort of like this mind fuck that Tomb Raider that inspired Uncharted, and Uncharted now inspires Tomb Raider. Whereas like Devilman inspired Berserk, and now new Devilman is basically like trying to replicate Berserk. It's so fucking weird how that happens. I think I usually have a third example, but I can't remember it right now. But like, this is Casca right here, right? This is some the Devilman extended universe. This probably came out after Berserk. That is fucking Casca if ever I've seen one, in potato suit and all. And it's sort of like, whoa, Devilman is now doing Berserk, when Berserk was always just trying to do Devilman. That Tomb Raider example is so good too. It's fucking crazy how life turns out. We're in the era of modern art where fucking the classics are being reinterpreted and they're taking from things that took from the classics. It's fucking insane. That was a weird side point, but that's sort of my go around. And maybe Berserk is a classic. I'd have to think about it more. Devilman's definitely a classic. Attack on Titan is not a classic. I don't think so. Do I like Attack on Titan more than Evangelion or Bebop? It's possible, right? Attack on Titan is ridiculously great. But it's not a classic. Maybe it could be when we see the ending. If it has an Evangelion ending, maybe it'd be a classic. I'm just not sure yet. But because I remember this got stirred on because I saw Giga, he made a tweet like, if Attack on Titan continues this trajectory, it'll be the modern anime classic. Now, I don't think the Attack on Titan anime is by any means a classic, because I think the manga is better than the anime. I fucking missed in the chat. Do you think you can bring a series? Do you think you can break down if a series is a classic objectively, or do you think it depends on a person's subjective tastes? Nothing in art is objective, but I don't know. Could you consider genre to be objective? I don't think you could, because I'm sort of trying to classify classic as a type of genre almost here. I don't know. You could objectively say what I would consider to be a classic if I like write out the separate criteria, and then you could test certain shows against it. But then it's just identifying art, so no, probably. I don't think you could objectively say that a series is a classic. You couldn't break it down, because you'd have to get people to agree what a classic was. And in art, weird things, like if you were to write out a criteria of what a classic would be, like someone would make a piece of art that intentionally like ticks off all the boxes but is bad or something, and then it's like, would this bad piece of art be considered a classic? Like, would one of the prerequisites for someone considering something a classic for it to be good? Because good is obviously subjective when it comes to art, so you couldn't say that. So yeah, I don't think you could ever objectively say anything was a classic. I say something to be a classic of anything really. Some consensus has to be reached about its characteristics. I hate this consensus argument. Not necessarily about classics, because you could have a point here, but I hate consensus theory in art at all. I hate that if people come to a consensus that something is great, that means it's objectively, or as close as objectively great as we can get. Because I would say people are very comfortable to make this argument when they're in like art circles, even if we consider like this right now to be an art circle where we sort of understand art better than the average person would, where the average person probably wouldn't even understand how to discuss character development or wouldn't even understand it as a concept, whereas sort of people in these sort of circles would. So yeah, we're comfortable in making this sort of like consensus argument when it's among art peers. But if you zoom out and say, by the global population, what do they come to a consensus about what is good? Well, then Transformers would probably be considered good, right? Because most people, most normies, most normal people just don't think about art really at all. They can't really afford to, right? They got to go to work. They got to look after their kids. They ain't got fucking time to think about these like major art fucking theories and bullshit like that, and think about art and come to like a criteria or a philosophy about what they enjoy. They just fucking watch Transformers and think it's fun. So people I don't think people would be comfortable with this consensus argument if they zoomed out more. I'm thinking about community consensus. I don't know. I definitely don't think that would be. Because then would something like Vinland Saga actually be considered a classic, like the anime now? A lot of people like it. I definitely don't like it. I think it has some very clear faults. I don't know. I would err on the side of it's always going to be subjective. I don't like consensus, like people coming to consensus that something is good. It really just means a collective of people, and you can manipulate people into thinking something is good or bad very easily, and people like to appease people they want to appease, right? And they'll do whatever to sort of agree with them. I wanted to see what this image was, but it's the ending theme. I was like, did the original Devilman have Dororo's a really old one. I wonder what the ending of that is, if it's like got a sad ending, because Dororo is like older than Devilman, I think. What the fuck is this? What is this Devilman story? I don't know. There's so much fucking Devilman side bullshit to keep up with. It's impossible. Just read the original manga and you'll be set. I don't know. Have we exacerbated this topic? I know a lot of people consider Ghibli movies to be classics. I've only seen 2 Ghibli movies. I've seen the first 2, if you don't count the actual first one. Nazca, right? Of the Valley of the Wind. I haven't seen that, but I've seen Castle in the Sky, and I've seen Grave of the Fireflies. Now, they're interesting. Would they qualify? I don't know. Castle in the Sky is like the most traditional story ever, but done in almost the best way I've ever seen it done. It's a very traditional story about this boy and this girl growing up. It's a coming-of-age story, but it's very, very good. It's sort of like... this is what people say about My Hero Academia. I don't necessarily agree, but it's like a generic concept done as well as possible. And I think that's what Castle in the Sky more is. It's very visually striking. All Ghibli movies are visually fantastic. So I don't know. Grave of the Fireflies would be more of a compelling argument. I don't know. I'd almost consider Grave of the Fireflies like a weird art house film. It's very fucking weird. It's very poignant. It's very nihilistic. I don't know, thematically, how strong is it? It's just sort of like very sad. I've only seen Grave of the Fireflies once. I think I've seen Castle in the Sky twice. Spirited Away is great. Spirited Away is not a Ghibli film, right? The problem this is sort of my fault, right? I have to, for me to watch any Ghibli movie, I've got to watch them all in order, right? If I want to play any Final Fantasy game, I've got to play them all in order. And in both of those lists, Ghibli movies and Final Fantasy games, I've seen 2. I've played the first 2 Final Fantasies. I've seen the first 2 Ghibli movies. I wish I could just cut through and watch the best ones, like Princess Mononoke looks like the most appealing one that I think I would like. But to watch that, I've got to go through the next ones. And the next one on the list is Totoro. And I don't know. I don't really want to watch Totoro. I don't know why. I don't know why it like off-puts me. And Final Fantasy 3, the only way to play that is in the DS, and it looks shit, so I don't really want to play that, but I've got to go forward in both of these lists, but I really don't want to. Spirited Away, I know it's from another pretty famous director, and I'd have to watch all of his movies in order. Spirited Away, maybe. Is Spirited Away a Ghibli movie? It's Spirited Away is like the time travel one. I know I've seen the main image, right? Is it a Ghibli movie? Don't tell me the Australian release date. Produced by it didn't say Studio Ghibli. No, it is. It is a fucking Ghibli movie. What the fuck am I talking about? So yeah, it's in the list anyway. I thought it was the other guy, the other really famous one. Satoshi Kon, I think, is the other one, right? But yeah, so Spirited Away is a Ghibli movie. So Grave of the Fireflies would probably have a better argument than Castle in the Sky. I think a lot of people would just say all Ghibli movies are classics. I don't know. It's sort of like, is Dragon Ball a classic? Like, I think original Dragon Ball is good. I think DBZ is fun. I don't know. I haven't rewatched DBZ recently enough to know if I like it or not. It's very influential. I don't know. DBZ doesn't really have a theme, right? It's a shonen, so it's sort of like friendship is magic or whatever the fuck. I don't know. I'd probably say no to Dragon Ball, and I'd probably, just to be safe, say no to both the Ghibli movies I've seen. Really, when I've racked my brain, the only two things I can think about that I would consider classics are Evangelion and Bebop. The influential angle they've got, the densely thematic angle they've got, the old angle they've got, the stood the test of time angle they both got. We still talk about them. They're still heavily relevant today. They've both got. I don't know. Great. They're considered widely to be very, very good. The consensus is that they are classics, I'd say. I don't know what other anime would qualify into those categories, or what other categories bind those two together. Is Naruto a classic? Smiley face. I don't know. Naruto might be my favorite shonen, don't tell the people, but no, I would not consider it a classic. Thematically, Naruto is laughably not dense and very, very frail when it comes to that. Subtext is not Naruto's fucking strong suit. Subtext is Evangelion's bread and butter, and Cowboy Bebop's substance. Ghost in the Shell is a good one. Fuck. I've only seen... on the old channel, I actually had a reaction video to the first time I ever saw Ghost in the Shell. I sat in this fucking car. I watched Ghost in the Shell. I've seen it twice, maybe since then, so I've seen it 3 times overall. I do really like Ghost in the Shell. I haven't analysed Ghost in the Shell nearly enough. I haven't thought about it nearly enough. I almost forget that I've seen it sometimes. I really like it. It is obviously heavily thematically dense. It's a classic. It's considered good by everybody. I don't know. I don't know if I like it enough to call it a classic. I don't know if I've seen it enough to call it a classic. Like, I very recently rewatched Bebop. I very recently rewatched Evangelion, and recency bias plagues any conversation like this. Man, Ghost in the fucking Shell. I think I need to consume more Ghost in the Shell content. I've seen episode 1 as standalone complex, and that's it. I've only seen the original movie and that. I've seen no other Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell, I'll get back to you on that one. That's a clever one. I like that. Dragon Ball is a classic shonen in my opinion, but got eternal love for Naruto, of course. Naruto, you're probably around my age. Naruto is the one we grew up with. Even though I grew up with Dragon Ball more so than Naruto. Dragon Ball, maybe in the eyes of the shonen, I think it would have to be the classic, right? It is the shonen that everything takes from, except for like One Piece. I think authorities on One Piece could probably say that One Piece is a classic. You'd think so, right? One Piece, so long running, the most popular anime manga property ever. By all accounts, really good. I don't know. I don't know enough about One Piece to comment, but One Piece would definitely be in the conversation, whereas I think Naruto wouldn't be. Naruto has such a bad reputation even though I think that's completely unfounded. One of these days, I'm going to strictly become a Naruto YouTuber and go on the defensive big time for Naruto. I think Naruto is the best shonen. But I have not seen many shonen. I've seen Dragon Ball, Ghost in the Shell. I love Scarlett Johansson, Kappa. Yes, I have not seen the live-action Ghost in the Shell. By all accounts, thankfully, I have not. Man, it would be interesting. I almost want to watch it. But yeah. What was I saying before that? How I was defending Naruto to the death. The only shonens I've seen is Naruto. It depends if you count like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, which I think do technically count as shonen. So I've seen them. And Dragon Ball. I've really only seen Naruto, Dragon Ball, and My Hero, I think. And I haven't been keeping up with My Hero recently, and I don't really like it. So I think Naruto and Dragon Ball might be my only shonens. I've seen like 60 episodes of One Piece when I was a kid. I recently tried to get into the manga again. I reread the first 2 volumes. Again, I didn't intend on stopping, but I just did. I got more infatuated with different things around me rather than One Piece. I've tried like 3 or 4 times now to get into One Piece properly, but it hasn't happened. So I'll probably keep on trying to get into One Piece, but alas, we didn't. I don't know. I don't have a very eclectic taste. Like, my other favorite shows is Serial Experiments Lain. Now, if we put this through the criteria, it almost does, but I don't think it's popular enough, or I don't know. I don't think I understand Lain enough either to properly put it into a category here of classic or not classic. Fucking Lain. Serial Experiments Lain. I need to rewatch it quickly. Did I watch it for the first time this year? This year has been so long. I think it was last year. Was it this year? I'm fucking melting at the pores here. I started this YouTube channel, well, not this one, but the original one, in December of last year. I know I made a Lain video very early on. Was it this year? No, it had to be last year. No, because it was when I first tried to watch Razafun, and that was a while ago. It was definitely when I was still in high school that I watched Lain for the first time. I need to rewatch Lain at least 7 more times before I talk about it at all. Steins Gate might be the closest thing to a modern classic that I've ever seen. Get this fucking zero pathetic bullshit off my screen now. What are we doing here? Steins Gate's really good. I don't know. Thematically, it's a visual novel, so things are sort of iffy. It's sort of a harem show in the weirdest of ways. Have a look at Okabe here. With these terrible fucking Zero designs. Get them out of my face. Steins Gate I'd pass on. A modern classic sort of fits Steins Gate. It sort of has that reputation of being a modern classic. One would allow for categorizations like classic, pop classic, normie classic. Such series as in the 2000s could slip in, i.e. Death Note, Full Metal Alchemist. I've not seen Full Metal Alchemist. Hot take. Death Note is very interesting though. I have a lot to say about Death Note that I'm going to put into a video eventually. There have been times in my life where I thought Death Note was the greatest thing ever. There have been times in my life where I wanted to write a negative sort of overall review of Death Note. There are times where I thought that characters in Death Note were terrible. And now I've come across, I really like Death Note again. I rewatched Death Note almost more than any other show. I don't know if I've ever had as much fun watching an anime the first time as I did watching Death Note with one of my friends, where we played this neat game where we sort of tried to figure out where the plot was going before it did. And it's sort of, I really want to make a video called Death Note, the show versus the audience, where I sort of talk about that experience more of sort of me versing the show and trying to out-clever the show and figure it out. Because I really think I'm really good at sort of little observation games like Death Note, like the game Light and L play. I think I'd fit in very well there. I like the little mind games and the detective little tricks, and I was really good at I remember the biggest example I remember of me and my friend watching it. We were at his house and we were watching it, and it was the episode where the cop's wife comes in, Naomi, I remember her name is. I don't remember if that's her fake name or the actual name, but I remember figuring out before Light did that she was using an alias, because Ryuk laughed and I sort of like clicked immediately. I was like, oh, she fucking got him. She's using an alias. And I remember that being like the funnest experience I've ever had. Because I remember I like figured it out instantaneously and blurted it out to my friend, and he was like, oh yeah, it's obviously what's going on. And then eventually when we got validation from the show that we were right, it was a lot of fun. And there were little things like that he picked up on that he got before the show revealed it. And it was sort of like you were playing the game with them to see who was going to win between Light and the girl and Light and L and little things like that. And it was always very fun. I remember getting that L was using... There's a trick he plays on Light when they first meet properly in the bar. I guess it's the bar. I don't remember if it's a bar. It's right before they get the phone call that Light's father had a heart attack. And L like gives him 3 notes and says like, can you rearrange these in order? Which are actually messages that Light had sent L. It's really convoluted. But the trick is that Light knows that there were only 3 notes, but L's trying to figure out if he knows that there are only 3 notes. And so the subtext of the scene is like, L is going to say that there was 4 notes even though there weren't, and try to gauge Light's reaction. It's a really complicated scene, but I remember figuring out that L was going to pull the thing like, oh no, there's an extra note that you didn't know about. It was all sort of little things like that. That was really fun with Death Note, but I don't think that considers it like a classic by any means. I don't know. Am I the only one who felt cheated by the Nier around the end of the series? No, Seth. I'm pretty sure everyone ever has said that. I don't think Death Note's second half is any worse until the last episode. I was a big Light fanboy when the first time, and I hated that he lost in the end. But that's another thing I want to analyze on a different date. So I'd say no to Death Note. Baccano is another really, really great show that is definitely thematically dense. I don't know, if I rewatched Baccano properly, maybe Baccano would qualify, but again, it sorely falls short in the popularity and the influence factor. Baccano is definitely an interesting one to consider in this conversation. But that's basically all the anime I've seen that I consider good enough to even be considered in the classic conversation. I've seen Psycho Pass. Some people consider that a classic. I definitely do not like Psycho Pass. I don't know, that's sort of my general thoughts on what constitutes a classic anime or manga. I really don't know what else to say. The only 2 I would consider would be... The 2 anime I'd consider would be Bebop and Evangelion. Those are the only 2 I can think of. And in manga, I've only read 4 manga, mind you, but I've read Berserk, and I wouldn't consider it a classic necessarily, but I would consider Devilman to be a manga classic. And again, I'd like to stress that classic is not an indication of how much I like something. I think Berserk is better than Evangelion and Bebop. I think Black Lagoon is better than Evangelion and Bebop. But I would consider them classic, whereas I wouldn't consider my more favorite things to be. If we apply this to video games, it gets very complicated, and I have not played very many video games, but it is a very interesting conversation to have. But for now, I think that's it. That's what I what I think. Fuck me. That's what I think constitutes a classic.